Let's get to President Obama. He's meeting with NATO's Secretary General at the White House this morning, and high on the list of topics to discuss was the fight against ISIS. The meeting comes as Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump again today repeated his criticism of NATO, calling it outdated and in need of a major makeover. Former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Admiral James Stavridis is joining me now live to tell us whether the organization's relationship with the U.S. really is outdated. Do you, sir, as a former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, agree with what Donald Trump has to say?
No, I completely disagree. I wouldn't tell Mr. Trump how to run a hotel, but I think I do know a few things about NATO. Let me start with the cost-sharing piece of this. The European allies spend collectively, Liz, $300 billion a year on defense. That's more than Russia and China combined. They're not meeting all of the goals they've set for themselves, but it's the second largest defense budget in the world. So we shouldn't be so quick to discount those kind of capabilities among allies who've stood and fought with us in Afghanistan, in Libya, in the Balkans, and really around the world.
Well, I get that, and NATO is an important organization, but I guess if you went back to, say, 2015, the numbers prove that, in essence, the U.S. accounted for 72% of all of the defense spending by NATO. It just feels outsized to a lot of people. Maybe make that more palatable for our viewers so that they understand.
I can. When you look at total defense spending, the United States defense spending is distributed globally, all around the world. A great deal of that money goes to defend our allies and protect our interests in the Arabian Gulf, in the Western Pacific. The portion of it that really is focused on Europe is what's relevant here. When you kind of look apples to apples and compare, the Europeans do not look as though they are, in any sense, free riding. I would argue they are key elements and key players in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Libya. That's what the president's going to be talking to the Secretary General about today.
Okay. Now, let's just say, because right now the world is extremely volatile at the moment, read ISIS. Talk a lot about ISIS and the situation there. Should NATO be more involved in fighting ISIS, or at least participating in the battle against it?
It absolutely should, Liz, and I have been advocating that along with many other voices. What NATO could do most effectively is create a NATO training mission in Iraq that could do the hard work of building the Iraqi security forces so they can retake Mosul, so they can participate in the fight against the Islamic State. Secondly, NATO has tremendous intelligence, information, logistics capability. It can use its AWACS aircraft. Already, many of the NATO nations individually are participating, but to bring the entire alliance into this would be very, very positive, and I suspect that is a key part of the discussion between the President and the Secretary General.
Before I let you go back to your students at Tufts, and it's a fine job you're doing over there. It's one of the toughest schools to get into. The U.S. Navy has come upon an Iranian ship that had thousands of weapons on it. Where were those weapons going from your point of view?
I'm almost certain that they were headed into Yemen. What's happening here is the Iranians are supporting the Houthi rebels who are co-religionists. They're part of the Shia side of the Islamic faith. They're in a fight with the Sunni government of Yemen. This is really part, Liz, of the larger Sunni-Shia conflict in the Middle East. And it's again an example of Iran using its money, its influence, its capabilities to destabilize regimes in the region. It's a problem.
We appreciate you coming on to talk about this. Thank you very much, Admiral.